Now, we did warn you that, I'm sorry, I think we've gone off tack somewhere, and he's turned up now, and we said, what are you going to talk about? And he said, knitting. Well, it's not much I know about knitting. And knitting, I talked to him last night. I got up at 4 o'clock this morning to watch all the YouTube videos that Mr. Dr. Ian Yeoman produces. And I couldn't find anything about knitting anywhere. So are we going to get an original story from you, Dr. Yeoman?
Yes.
It's yours.
Hello. Hi. Kia ora. Hi. Kia ora. Hello. Well, I'm Ian Yeoman. I'm an associate professor at Victoria University in Wellington. And I'm going to talk about emerging trends. So just talk about something different. Hello. Right. Okay, let's start. Right. What do you see when you look at this photograph? What do you see? Minister, what do you see?
Night watch.
Sorry?
Night watch.
Night watch. Okay. You see? Okay. That's all of you in the audience. When I look at you, who cares who's on the stage? You know, I've got this mobile phone in front of me, and it's a representation of society. We're very immersed into that mobile phone. This is a photograph taken at, it's the Royal Museum in Amsterdam, and it's the Old Masters. And people think, is that generation, the millennium generation, disengaged with the world around us? Some people say, you know, the mobile phone and the digital society, it means we forget tourism. We're very inward-looking. We don't see what's around us. And tourism is about what's around us in society. But you've got to remember, when you're taking a photograph, it's a moment in time. So what I'm going to ask you now is, what do you see in this YouTube clip? Oops, wrong way. What do you see in this YouTube clip?
Is generally when I'm watching TV, also when I'm in class. Also, I go to the movies and knit.
I used to read and knit a lot.
I do knit in the dining hall sometimes. It's my motivation for finishing my homework at night.
Knitting is amazing.
It's relaxing.
It is kind of like a meditative thing once you get into it.
So yeah, I guess the mission of the club is peace. We're just knitting club. We come to the Dean's Lounge every Tuesday and we knit for like 2 hours. It's the best part of my week because it's the calmest part of my week.
There's a book you might want to read. It's called The Invisible Library. It's about time-traveling, dimension-hopping spy librarians.
Did you ever give your dad that hat you made that you
did,
kept wearing?
for Christmas.
Nice. Did it fit him?
Yes.
Nice.
We just sit around and talk and knit, and we'll teach you how to knit. And you don't have to be good.
Most people just really freak out when they come to learn to knit. They're like, oh gosh, like I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm gonna be so terrible. And it's like, you're gonna be fine.
Basically, you just have a bunch of loops on a needle and you put another needle through it, you loop it around, and somehow it works.
It's a lot of doing the exact same thing over and over and over until you get cloth.
You want to take the bit that's attached to the ball. So yeah, you gotta scooch it. So like whoop, and then off. And then you're done with your first stitch.
Last week was my first time, and now I guess you could say that I'm a pro.
I think it's the kind of thing that people are sort of interested in because you get a chance to make something that you can actually use.
Other hobbies, like sports and stuff, there's no tangible product afterwards. So this is like one of my favorite hats. I wear it all the time. And it was like the first one I actually made for myself. So like, I love it. It's great because it covers my ears and it's warm in the winter, so.
It's my scarf I've been working on. It's Game of Thrones. It's got the Stark motto on it, which is winter is coming.
This is my Ravenclaw scarf, and I ended up going with book Ravenclaw as opposed to movie Ravenclaw, which is usually silver. The thing with knitting is it's something that I think harkens back to a lot of people's childhood because family member, teacher, somebody taught them to do it.
I think I started when I was 6. My mom taught me. The first thing I ever made was a scarf that I gave to my grandmother. I still remember it. It was brown. There's something about hand knit things, especially as gifts, that really means a lot to people, that you took this time out of your life to make this thing for me. I mean, I tell anyone who says that's really cool what you're doing. I'm like, come to Knitting Club. We're really nice. You don't even need to bring your own yarn.
And if there's an apocalypse, we're gonna be the ones to survive because we will have clothes.
Hello. The purpose of the video is not to say knitting tourism is the next big thing. Okay? How many people here are knitters? Who's brought their knitting with them? Anybody? God, there's got to be some knitters here. Oh, you're just all shy. The purpose of the video, as a researcher, you have to ask the question, why did people do something? Why do people do something? And that's about observational research. So if you observe what society's doing, you can understand and explain change. And that's very important. So that's the purpose of the video. Why do people knit, and what does it mean for tourism? So a couple of things that we start with. We live in this society which is all about technology. But there's something very basic about knitting. And that basic thing about knitting is authenticity. Okay, it's a place where you stop and do something. It's a place where you talk to people. And knitting's about heritage, it's about craft. And there's been a big switch in that trend in the terms of people doing that. Authenticity is right at the center of most tourism propositions today. Okay? And you can't escape that. Whether it's food tourism, whether it's knitting, whether it's culture. Authenticity is authenticity separates the Maldives from Turkey. It's the degree of originality that they've got. The other trend we look to in the terms of that is basically people are getting together. One of the things, if you notice in big urban centers, is the number of clubs. The people that take their hobby and do something with it. So examples in knitting are clubs like Stitch and Bitch. It's a worldwide organization of knitting clubs around the world. Other things, if you're single, one of the things you'd probably see is the number of dance clubs that have come through in urban centers. People that are learning to get. And this is what tourism's about. This is what tourism's about. It's about, on one hand, it's about single people getting together to do something. And Ethan Waters, who's a trend spotter, talks about this in the terms of urban tribes. Single people traveling together to go somewhere and do something. So that's one trend. The other big trend we've seen in society is the phenomena of Bridget Jones. Have you all seen the film, or one of the films? Nobody? Yes, yes, yes. Good. You know, it's a brilliant film. It's a bit slapstick. It's a British comedy. But the phenomena is all about single females looking for a partner or looking for a husband. And it's also a representation of how society's changed. In the 1950s, there was an article in the New York Times which talked about if you were a single female and hadn't been married by the age of you were 30, you were probably ugly, immoral, or neurotic. Society has changed and moved on with that. Society's completely changed. In the 1950s, in America, you went from father to husband. You got married at 18. Today, the typical American goes from father to 9 boyfriends, then to husband. So if there's anybody here that's on boyfriend number 8, females, he's not quite the right one. Okay? Wait for the next one. Okay. So that's what it's all about. So that's the phenomena of Bridget Jones. Because if you look at the knitting clubs, they are predominantly single females knitting. Okay? However, one of the things about A knitting club is fundamentally a social network. It's a club where we get together and share things. And there's a difference between men and women in the terms of why they get together and what they do. Fundamentally, men define themselves more by their work and relax with unhealthy food and drink, and we talk about Arsenal, Manchester United, and me, I talk about Sunderland. Whereas single women, by contrast, when they get together, they're likely to meet friends, socialize, turn to their spiritual side, and relax with yoga. So what we see there is a difference between female products and male products. But fundamentally, tourism is a social network system. It's where we get together to share experiences. Tourism brings people together to do things. Tourism is where you have to put your mobile phone down and switch off, and you have to stop and do things. And the typical example of that in the terms of a shared experience is culinary tourism. Culinary tourism is where you stop, share, eat, talk, and drink. It's very different. So tourism is it's a bonding experience. It's something about sharing and doing something. Yesterday, I did the Kuala Lumpur Street Kitchen, a community-orientated project here in the city, where we got together with some other tourists and members of the local, it was a local charity, basically, went out, made some soup, then it was a street kitchen, it was a soup kitchen, we went out and shared it with other people that were underprivileged. So tourism's a shared experience. It's where you get together. It's not for individuals, you share it. The other thing that tourism does, and like the knitting club does, like the Boston University Knitting Club, it's all about a sense of proportion. Tourism creates a sense of community. Tourism creates a sense of belonging together and doing things. So that's very, very important, what tourism's about in the terms of where it goes. And the other thing you have to observe, the other thing that's going on, when I was at university, the big debates were all about race and equality in the terms of that's what we debated. I'm originally from Sunderland, the northeast of England, and in the 1970s I was in school, and these were the big issues. Today, the big issues at school are climate change. And the advocates of climate change, the ones that are leading the demonstrations, the ones that are trying to action change, are those millenniums, those school children. And that's what they talk about. They talk about climate change. They're advocates for that. And that millennium generation is not stuck with their mobile phone. That millennium generation is very concerned about equality, a better society, and wanting to improving things. So they're strong advocates of the environment and change. The other big trend when you're observing the Knitting Club, one of the other things we talk about is an ageless society. An ageless society, it's just basically what your parents think you're doing. What am I trying to say with this one? I've lost my words, so just bear with me. Basically, an ageless society is where the values and parameters of what your parents did are completely different from what you are doing. If you think about it in New Zealand, what we're seeing in New Zealand is 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds coming through now and doing bungee jumping. Okay? My grandmother is 95. And what she did for her birthday was, I want to drive a Harley Davidson motorcycle. That was what she dreamt of. So it's very much an ageless society. Boundaries and values have completely changed. Anyway, what does this all mean for tourism? Well, everybody here, all of the national leaders from all of the NGOs, you're going to go away and formulate a policy on knitting tourism, aren't you? It's going to be at the center of Maldives, Turkey, Malaysia, everybody. What I'm trying to say, if you've read Chris Anderson's book, The Long Tail, there's lots more diversification in tourism. And there's a group of people that are knitters, and they do things. So things like Carnival Cruise Liners will do cruises with knitting clubs, etc., etc. So what does this mean for tourism? A couple of observations. Basically, the more technology you have in society, the more you want to get away from it, if you see that. Don't presume the future is technology, okay? Because when we invented the television, it wasn't the end of tourism. When we invented the mobile phone, it's not the end of tourism. At the end of the day, tourism's about one thing. It's about people and connection and doing something, okay? It's about doing so. So, for example, in Wellington, the capital city of New Zealand, there's a very strong counterculture. One of the most popular cafes is the board game cafe. It's where people come along and play traditional board games. And for every board game that there is, there's a convention. So there's a Snakes and Ladders convention. There's a Star Wars convention. There's a Star Trek convention. Basically, just don't think the future is technology. It's still about people and doing things. For every trend, there's an anti-trend or a counterculture trend. One of the big things that we've seen in changes is what technology's done as a distribution system. And probably one of the big changes we've seen in the terms of product development is the rise of the experience economy. Now, tourism is everybody's business. So if you've got a hobby like knitting or chess or photography, you as an individual can take that to the world through, for example, Airbnb experiences. Your individual passion and experience you share with the rest of the world. So everybody that lives in the city of Kuala Lumpur and what their hobby is becomes a tourism product, becomes an opportunity to sell to the rest of the world. One observation in the terms of travelers, what we see now is a shift in society, what we call the solo female traveler. And that market is coming through predominantly in, for example, in China. The role of a female in society is changing. You know, they're no longer going from father straight to husband. They're going to university, they're educated, and they're traveling. So we've seen this shift, and we've seen a lot more solo female travelers emerging from Asia and Southeast Asia. Anyway, if you'd like to know more, you can read my academic paper. Because the future of tourism in New Zealand is all about sheep and wool. Okay? We have lots of sheep. Anyway, that's my thoughts about the future of tourism. The point of the exercise and the point of the presentation was to say the future is not about knitting tourism, but what I'm trying to say is just observe people around you and what they're doing and try and explain why they're doing it. And from that, you'll find some secret, some product which you can take forward. Thank you very much.